Hey, how is everybody? Good to see you. This is Dr. Flight. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about customers' perceptions of price and pricing in general. And if you remember, the 5 C's of pricing include different considerations that you would make in regard to setting your price and establishing a price strategy. So one of those considerations deals with customers. You'd think that this is a fairly important concept, and it is, based on kind of this idea that customers look at price and they assess value to your product as a result of price. And they look at your price and they say, hey, that's expensive, or that's inexpensive, that's prestigious, that's a value price type of a thing. That's a bargain, that's overpriced. There's a lot of interpretations that consumers make based on price. And one of the core concepts of this idea of price is that customers are sensitive to price changes. And so when you raise the price, it influences the demand curve. And when you decrease the price, raise or decrease the price, either way, it's going to influence demand for your product. And these things are inversely related. So when one goes up, the other goes down. And we are said to be able to control price. And so as a result, when we control price, we're also controlling demand. Now, there are some other issues involved. Dealing with complementary products and your competitors' pricing, and there's all kinds of extensions, I guess, from this core concept, but you need to know the core concept of price sensitivity. This is something that you learn in economics. If you had an economics course, you've looked at the demand curve and this inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. You've also calculated the slope of that demand curve, and that's what we'll do again here in this video. So when we look at the slope of that demand curve, we get a number like rise over run, the slope of the y-intercept, you might call it that, or the y, the constant, or c, or the beta, whatever you want to call it. You're just calculating the slope of that line. And when you do that, we call it price sensitivity. And the steeper that curve, the more intense, I guess, and the shallower that curve, the less intense. So we'll look at that a little bit here in this video as we sort of move forward. Ultimately, when we're talking about price sensitivity, we're talking about how many units, or what will customer demand be based on prices when the prices change. And this is the relationship that we want to look at. If we know that we can that customers are price insensitive, then we can change our price and it's not going to impact demand very much. Gasoline is price insensitive in the sense that prices for gasoline go up and down by large percentages, yet demand stays fairly stable, regardless of those fluctuations of price. Ice cream is the exact opposite. Price changes in ice cream reflect and they create enormous changes in actual demand. Customers are very sensitive to price in that product category. So knowing how sensitive your customers are is really important. So the slope of that demand curve, again, indicates price sensitivity. The steeper the slope, the steeper the slope, we call that inelastic. Okay, so when we're steep slope, I can make a fairly large, I know I'm doing this backwards, a fairly large price change, and the demand change will be pretty low. The flatter it is, the more price sensitive they are. So let's look at this a little bit more. We're going to calculate this and look at some examples. So again, kind of just visually look at the first box here. We have a fairly flat slope. and you're going to see a fairly small or a smaller change between price 1 and price 2 than the change you see there in Q1, Q2. And then in the second box, you're going to see the opposite. You'll see the exact same price change, P1, P2, but that demand change now is very, very small. So the first box, the first box there would be your example of different products where, again, you make one change and the demand changes dramatically. There's a big difference. So maybe your ice cream example, box 2 would be that gasoline example where I'm changing my price a lot, but demand really doesn't change much. So kind of the idea of the slope of the line indicates kind of what you can do price-wise and how it'll impact your sales. So how do we calculate this? There's a couple different ways to do it. This is probably the easiest way conceptually. What we do is we calculate two things: the percent change in quantity demanded, and then the percent change in price, and then divide them together. Okay, so some examples we'll just walk through, and then that'll kind of be enough. But you got to remember this formula. You got to remember how to do this. You got to practice it. You got to do that, okay, to get it. So 1,200 units at price $15. So we have a demand of 1,200, and we have a price at 15. Let's say I change that price from 15 to 12. So the price is changing. It's going down 15 to 12. Meanwhile, the demand goes up, right? Because we lowered our price, so demand goes up. It goes up from 1,200 units to 1,500 units. Okay, so we have a change in demand and we have a change in price. So remember, the D, change in demand, is going to be on top divided by the change in price. D comes before P. Okay, so we'll calculate this up. Change in demand. So this is a percent change that we want to look at. So we take the original minus the new, and we see that our demand for this product, so we take the original minus the new. So this is going to seem odd, right? Because we go from the original to the new, we have minus 300 units. Okay, so now we've got to divide the original by that change in order to get our percent change. So 1,200 divided by 3 is minus 4. Okay, that's the top part of our equation. So we're going to have minus 4 divided by something. All right, the bottom part of the equation, we take our change in price, which is $15. We lowered it to 12, so that gives us 3. And then we take our original 15 and divide by that difference, 3. And in this case, we have 5. So that the percent change is 5. That'd be 500%. Okay, just if you were going to do this with decimals and such. All right, so okay, so we have our percent change in quantity demanded, minus 4, divide by 5, and we have a price elasticity of 0.8, and there's a negative sign in there. So let's talk a little bit about this, and let's talk a little bit about how we interpret this. Okay, so you'll always have a negative sign because of the calculation. Now, the way we interpret it, though, is we take the negative sign out, and then we look at that, whatever's left, relative to 1. When we say 1, that's called unitary elasticity, and it's a 45-degree angle on that chart. Okay, so we have something less than 1. And so number 1, drop the negative sign. So now we're left with 0.8, and that's less than 1. So our price elasticity demand is said to be inelastic. So it's more up and down. It's more up and down than flat. Okay, because it's less than 1. So it's more up and it's inelastic. Again, if it was 1, it'd be a 45-degree angle, unitary elasticity. If it's greater than 1, it'll be flatter and it'll be elastic. Okay? So this is how you interpret this calculation. All right, another example. We're going to have 2,200 units at a price of $1.50. If we, again, lowered that price, we would lower the price to $1.15 now, and our units changed. They went up, of course, to 2,600. Okay, so percent change in quantity demanded. We take the 2,200 because that's our original, minus 2,600, we get negative 400. And then we're going to take our original again, 2,200, and divide it by that difference. So our percent change quantity demanded is negative 5.5 this time. Okay, going to do the price, exact same like we did before. We'll take the original minus the new, it's 35 cents. Then we take the original price, $1.50, and divide it by that 35, and we get 4.29. That's the percent change in price. So 5.5 divided by 4.29, negative 1.28. Okay, negative 1.28. That's our price elasticity demand. Now remember, we're going to drop that negative sign. So drop the negative sign, and we have 1.28. 1.28 is greater than 1 this time, and so our price elasticity of demand is now elastic. It's greater than 1. Okay, so again, it's a flatter curve as opposed to a narrower curve like that. Okay, so that's calculating price elasticity of demand. Again, if you've done this before, then you should be familiar with this. But what matters to us is this idea that customers are sensitive to change. And so when we're evaluating, for instance, market segments, this is something we look at because we compare one market segment to another, and that's something that's important to us, right, to understand and to know. All right, so other things that affect price elasticity of demand. So price elasticity of demand happens, but we know there are lots of things that can impact it. A couple things that you should know will impact it will be income. So if you make a lot of money and the purchase or the item, the product is low in value or low in cost, then price changes probably aren't going to impact whether you buy the product or not. If somebody makes a lot of money and the price of steak goes up and down, they're still going to buy steak because it's what they want. If somebody has less money and the price of steak goes up and down, if it goes up, then they're going to switch to chicken and pork, right? Because those are less expensive. You could call those substitutes even. But it's partly because that expense relative to their pay is significant. So I mentioned this idea of substitutes. If there are a lot of other options out there, if you raise your price, people will just simply switch to the other option. They won't feel locked in, and so they're much more price sensitive, in other words, if there's a lot of substitutes out there. So if income is low, if there are a lot of substitutes out there, the price sensitivity will be much greater, sensitivity, so that number PED will be higher, above 1. If there's a wealthy market out there and there are no substitutes or things like that, then price sensitivity will be lower. Necessity of product. Again, if you have to have the product, you're going to pay for it. Gasoline, we have to get to work, we have to get to school, we have to use our cars. Can't really change our car behavior much, driving behavior, just because gas prices change. So it's a necessity. So it's very inelastic. Costs of complementary products that are often bought together. This is another thing. So let's say you buy hot dogs. Well, you're likely to buy hot dog buns, right? So let's say I get a good deal on hot dogs, but then I go down the aisle for buns and I see that they're expensive. Well, the fact that I'm buying the hot dogs means I'm still going to buy those buns. And so sometimes when we talk about bundling, we're talking about putting these sensitivities together and kind of getting somebody to buy one product because they're buying another product. And it doesn't really matter what the bun price is. I'm still going to buy them because I bought the hot dogs, if that makes sense, right? So retailers do this all the time, where they price one product in a bundle low, and then they price the other bundled items higher, and they make their profit off of those, right? So complementary products that go together would be ones that we would think about maybe bundling, and think about their effects on price elasticity of their complementary products. Okay, wrapping this up, be aware of this idea of demand elasticity, and whether a product, when I change the price, will result in a big demand change or a little demand change. Okay, if it's a little demand change, it'll be inelastic. If it's a big demand change, then it'll be elastic. Calculate price elasticity of demand. Be able to calculate using the information you've received to measure that. So you're going to take the change in demand, percent change in demand, divide that by the percent change in price. Okay, when you get that answer, drop the negative sign and then interpret that number. Okay, those are the 3 steps that you have to do. Okay, what are the factors influencing price elasticity? Think about income effects. Those are big. Think about the availability of substitutes. That's super big, and necessity of product, whether it's needed or not. And then also this idea of products that are also bought in a bundle with it. Those prices, they all affect whether we'll buy the primary product or not. All right, so this was exciting. I love talking about pricing. Pricing is a fun area to work in. And so let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great day.